There are many geographical facts that seem simple and straightforward, like the Pacific Ocean being the largest ocean on the planet. However, there are geographical curiosities that defy logic, seem improbable, and could change the way we see our world. In this video, we've gathered 30 surprising facts that, at first glance, seem contradictory. Some of these may be known, but surely others will impress you. Let's start with the first one. Did you know that Mount Everest grows every year? Mount Everest, the highest mountain in the world, gets a few millimeters taller each year due to the tectonic movement of the Indian and Eurasian plates. That means technically the highest point on Earth is constantly changing. There's a place where you can be in 4 states at the same time. In the United States, there's a point called Four Corners, where the borders of Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico meet. There, you can literally put each of your hands and feet in a different state at the same time. Greenland is bigger than India. Or is it? On the map, Greenland looks gigantic, appearing much bigger than India. But in reality, India is almost 3 times bigger in area. This happens because of the Mercator map projection, which distorts the size of regions near the poles. There's a river that disappears every day. The Hamza River, in the Amazon, is known as the Invisible River because it flows entirely underground, about 4,000 meters deep. Its length is as long as the Amazon River, but you'll never see its waters flowing on the surface. The Atlantic Ocean is growing, while the Pacific is shrinking. Thanks to the movement of tectonic plates, the Atlantic grows by about 2.5 centimeters every year, while the Pacific is slowly shrinking. This means that, in millions of years, the world map we know will be completely different. Norway's coastline is incredibly long. Norway's coastline, with its countless inlets and fjords, is so long that, if stretched out, it could circle the globe twice. This happens because of the coastline paradox, where the highly irregular edges significantly increase the total length. Even though Norway is the 61st largest country by area, it has the 2nd largest coastline in the world. More people speak English in the Philippines than in the United Kingdom. Although English is the official language of the United Kingdom, it's in the Philippines where we find more people speaking the language. About 70 million Filipinos speak English, while the total population of the UK is around 69 million, with about 64 million being English speakers. This discrepancy is due to the widespread use of English in the Philippines, where it's one of the official languages used in government, education, and business. The surprising connection between North Korea and Norway, despite the huge distance between the two countries, there is a direct route that connects Pyongyang, North Korea, to Oslo, Norway, passing through just one country, Russia. This curious fact is possible because of Russia's vast territory, which spans over 17 million square kilometers, linking East Asia to Europe. The U.S. state closest to continental Africa, it may sound counterintuitive, but the U.S. state closest to Africa isn't Florida, known for its proximity to the Atlantic, but rather Maine. Located in the far northeastern part of the United States, Maine is just over 5,000 kilometers away from Africa, while Florida is about 1,500 kilometers farther. This oddity is due to the curvature of the Earth and the position of the African continent relative to the North Atlantic. The British concept of a heat wave in the United Kingdom, a country known for its mild climate. A heat wave is declared when the temperature exceeds 25 degrees for 3 consecutive days. Even so, the UK's temperature record is 40.3 degrees C, set in 2022, surpassing historical heat peaks in tropical countries like Malaysia, Sri Lanka, and Congo. This extreme event highlighted the growing impacts of climate change in traditionally cooler regions. The surprising number of native German speakers in Brazil. Although German isn't an official language in Brazil, the country is home to one of the largest native-speaking communities of the language outside of Europe. It's estimated that around 3.3 million Brazilians speak German as their first language. This number exceeds the total number of German speakers in officially German-speaking countries like Belgium, Luxembourg, and Liechtenstein, reflecting the significant German immigration to southern Brazil in the 19th and 20th centuries. More camels in Australia than in Egypt. Even though Egypt is often associated with camels, it's actually Australia that has a larger population of these animals. It's estimated that Australia has around 300,000 camels living in the wild, while Egypt has a significantly smaller number. Introduced in the 19th century, camels adapted so well to Australia's dry climate that they're now considered an invasive species, with regular population control programs in place. A navy from a landlocked country, even without access to the sea, Bolivia maintains one of the largest naval fleets among landlocked countries, with 173 vessels. The Bolivian Navy operates on rivers, lakes, and strategic water areas, such as Lake Titicaca, assisting in transportation, anti-smuggling efforts, and supporting remote communities. Furthermore, the existence of this force reflects Bolivia's long-standing desire to reclaim its lost coastline, which was taken by Chile during the War of the Pacific in the late 19th century. Russia is so vast that if it were divided into two parts, its European and Asian portions, each would be the largest country on its continent. Russia's European part, even though it only makes up about 23% of its total landmass, would still be larger than any other country in Europe. On the other hand, its Asian portion, with vast stretches of tundra, forests, and mountains, is larger than any other country in Asia. This fact really highlights the mind-boggling size of the world's largest country. The happiness index in Bhutan is famous worldwide for measuring its progress using the Gross National Happiness (GNH) index instead of traditional economic indicators. However, the country ranked 95th out of 156 nations in the 2019 World Happiness Report. This ranking is surprising, considering Bhutan is an example of policies focused on well-being, but it reflects the challenges its population faces, such as economic limitations and developing infrastructure. Christians in China. Although only 2% of China's population identifies as Christian, that small percentage amounts to around 27 million people, more than the entire population of Australia. This number reflects the massive size of China's population and highlights how even religious minorities in the country can represent impressive absolute figures. With Christianity quietly growing in China, it's expected that these numbers will continue to rise in the coming decades. The economic impact of Indiana. With just 6.9 million inhabitants, the U.S. state of Indiana has an impressive GDP of about $500 billion. For comparison, this is more than the GDP of populous countries like the Philippines, Vietnam, or Bangladesh. This economic strength comes from its diverse industrial base, which includes manufacturing, agriculture, biotechnology, and transportation, making Indiana a key economic driver in the United States, the easternmost and westernmost state of the U.S. Though it may seem strange, the U.S. state that is both the easternmost and westernmost is Alaska. This happens because the Aleutian Islands, which are part of the state, cross the 180th meridian, the international date line. As a result, Alaska stretches both to the farthest west and east points of the planet, a curious fact that often goes unnoticed. San Marino and its love for vehicles. San Marino, one of the smallest nations in the world, with only 33,500 inhabitants, surprises by having more registered vehicles than people. The country has around 54,000 vehicles, making it the world's highest per capita vehicle registration rate. This phenomenon is attributed to the high standard of living and the fact that many foreigners register their vehicles in the country due to favorable tax incentives. The longest border of France. Although it might be easy to imagine that France's longest land border would be with Spain or Germany, it's actually with Brazil. The border between French Guiana, an overseas territory of France in South America, and Brazil stretches for 730 kilometers, surpassing France's land borders with any other European country. The closest land point to space Mount Chimborazo in Ecuador is the closest point to space, even though it isn't the highest mountain in the world. This happens because Earth isn't a perfect sphere. It's a geoid that's slightly flattened at the poles and bulging at the equator. This bulge puts Chimborazo's summit about 2,400 meters closer to space than Mount Everest. The importance of Samsung for South Korea. Samsung, the tech giant, is responsible for about 20% of South Korea's GDP. This shows the massive impact the company has on the country's economy, extending far beyond electronics, including construction, insurance, and even chemical sectors. Samsung's global success is a key pillar of South Korea's economy. Suda, The Spanish city in Africa, Ceuta, is an autonomous city of Spain located in the northern part of the African continent, near Morocco's coast. Even though it's separated from mainland Europe by the Strait of Gibraltar, it has been under Spanish sovereignty since the 15th century. Its strategic position makes Ceuta a key point for trade and migration between Europe and Africa. The lack of forests in Greenland. Despite its name suggesting a Greenland, Greenland has only 2.2 kilometers of forests. In comparison, Iceland, another Nordic country, has about 1,800 kilometers of forested areas. The explanation lies in Greenland's extremely cold climate, which prevents large forested areas from growing. The name of Papua New Guinea. The name Papua New Guinea has a curious origin. The region's inhabitants were compared to the people of Guinea in West Africa, due to physical similarities perceived by the European explorers who visited the area. Thus, the name combines Papua, derived from a Malay word meaning curly hair, and New Guinea, highlighting the connection to the African region. The narrowest width of Chile is known as one of the longest and narrowest countries in the world. Its maximum width is only 350 kilometers, while its length from north to south exceeds 4,300 kilometers. To give you an idea, the country could easily fit between Iceland and the Faroe Islands, or between the African mainland and Madagascar. The world's largest exclusive economic zone, EEZ. Although France ranks only 48th in land area, it has the world's largest exclusive economic zone, EEZ, covering 11.7 million kilometers. This vast area is due to France's overseas territories scattered across the globe, like French Guiana, islands in the Pacific, and territories in the Indian Ocean. Equatorial Guinea and its position on the equator. Despite its name, Equatorial Guinea isn't directly located on the equator. Only a small island belonging to the country, called Annobon Island, is close to the imaginary line. On the other hand, the equator, which actually crosses the equator, lives up to its name. The origin of the nickname, the Windy City, Chicago, in the United States is known as the Windy City, but the nickname doesn't just refer to the winds from Lake Michigan. Historically, it was also used to criticize local politicians, famous for their exaggerated speeches and inflated promises in the 19th century. So, the nickname combines a meteorological feature with a political cultural trait. The highest mountain in the UK, or not, Ben Nevis, at 1,345 meters, is the highest mountain in mainland United Kingdom. However, if we include British overseas territories, the title belongs to Mount Hope in Antarctica, which reaches 3,329 meters. This quirky fact shows how the UK extends far beyond its main islands. The largest desert in the world is in Antarctica. Antarctica is the largest desert on the planet, covering about 14 million kilometers. Even though it's a frozen desert and not a sandy one, it qualifies as a desert due to its extreme dryness. Interestingly, its area surpasses the combined total of the three largest sandy deserts in the world: the Sahara, the Arabian Desert, and the Gobi Desert. South of Detroit, it's Canada. In a curious geographical fact, if you travel directly south from certain parts of downtown Detroit, Michigan, you'll end up in Canada. More specifically, you'll arrive in Windsor, Ontario. This happens because Detroit is located just north of a bend in the Detroit River, which defines part of the border between the two countries. The impressive volume of Lake Baikal in Russia contains about 20% of all the liquid fresh water on Earth. Its extreme depth, reaching 2,600 meters, makes it the deepest lake in the world. Remarkably, Baikal holds more water than all 5 of North America's Great Lakes combined. The flattest and lowest country in the world, the Maldives, with an average elevation of just 1.8 meters above sea level, is the flattest and lowest country on Earth. The highest point in the archipelago is a 5.1-meter hill located in a golf course. This vulnerability makes the Maldives extremely susceptible to rising sea levels caused by climate change. The world's largest underwater waterfall, the Denmark Strait Cataract, is the largest waterfall in the world, but you can't see it. It's underwater. The phenomenon occurs because cold, dense water currents sink beneath warmer, less dense water layers. The submerged waterfall plunges an incredible 3,500 meters, much deeper than any terrestrial waterfall. Bonus, Yemen and Apple's AirPods in 2023. Yemen's GDP was about $17 billion, less than the revenue Apple made from AirPod sales in the same year, which totaled around $18 billion. This contrast highlights the economic power of a multinational corporation compared to countries with struggling economies. Which of these curiosities did you already know? Which one surprised you the most? And are there any others we didn't mention in the video? Share it with us in the comments. And if you're not already subscribed, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on anything new.